My name is Val Vivona, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am a white woman in my 60s with short gray hair and wearing red-rimmed glasses and a green jumper, sleeveless jumper. And behind me is my kitchen. And basically, it would be a kitchen counter and light fixture in the back.
Hi everyone, my name is Leanne Lipas. My pronouns are she, hers, hers, and they, them, theirs. My image description, I am a young Asian American woman with short black hair. The ends are kind of like pumpkin spice colors, like a combination of orange and a little bit of red. And behind my wonky background, which is my green screen is acting weird, but don't mind that at all. The overall image is a cute cartoon named Pusheen and their friends. They're hanging out, they're chilling out by a pink couch. They're hanging out in the living room. They have like a tea bag, tea with a tea bag hanging around, and then they have like their friend in the window right there where they're just peeking out. But I wanted to do something cute because all the other backgrounds are like, oh, so official and whatnot. So like I wanted to do something fun. But before we get started, I want to know a little bit more about you. So I'm curious, how did you get involved with the disability rights movement?
After high school, I went to Hofstra University. And I think a little bit before that, I got involved with disability stuff and demonstrations and that kind of thing. Then at Hofstra, I got involved with the disability rights group with fellow students and friends. And then after graduation, came out to Berkeley. I came the year before to visit Judy Human, and a good friend that I went to school with, who she lived with at the time, Nancy D'Angelo. And you know, everybody knows everybody and that kind of thing. So I had a fantastic week in Berkeley, which you're not here to describe. But on the basis of that, after I graduated, the same friend from Hofstra who came out for that vacation trip moved out here with me. And that's kind of how I landed here and expanded my knowledge about the disability rights movement and start to work on different things.
Wow, that's so cool. Just like hearing a little bit about your background, because I was like, I'm curious. What did Val do and whatnot? It's always good to know a little bit. So since you mentioned about Berkeley, I am curious to know how did you meet Ed Roberts? Did you meet him through Berkeley, or how did you meet him?
I first met Ed at CIL in Berkeley. And that was when Berkeley was on, it was in a very old building on University Avenue in Berkeley. And I worked there like part-time and attendant referral. I got to know him better when I worked at the World Institute on Disability.
Oh, that makes sense now. I remember hearing a lot about CIL and also just overall like what he's done, which is kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to do this project, because I've known a good amount based on like watching films and whatnot, hearing from people's different stories. But it's so interesting to like just like to hear a little bit more about like how many people got to meet him. So the next question is, what role did Ed play in your life and how did he influence you?
You know, Ed was starting the whole independent living movement out here. And so, you know, when we were hearing about it, like we were hearing about the Center for Independent Living that was starting, which basically was out of an apartment building, the same one that Judy lived in when I came to visit. So, you know, he was the precursor of a lot of it on, you know, on the West Coast. And And so it played a role in my life because I came here to live and the accessibility was tremendous. It was just a whole different world. And he had it, he was instrumental in that. So in some ways, a lot of us owe him the sort of life change of moving to this very accessible community that was sort of on the rise at the time.
Yeah, and I remember watching Crip Camp and also learning more about him and Judy and all the amazing activists and advocates who contributed to the rights movement, just seeing like how much work they put in, and especially you too. I gotta give a shout out to you. Y'all put like so much work and effort to make the world more accessible. I know like we're still getting there, but I think the fact that where you guys were back in the 60s and 70s, that was like kind of the catalyst to where we are currently. The third question that since you mentioned like you met him through CL, what was your first impressions? Like, what was your impression of him? What was his personality like?
Well, he's has had a great presence, and he's tall, and he's would always look you in the eye when he was talking, very focused. In a way, he's definitely a strong personality, but he was in some ways very mild-mannered in the way he would interact with people. And I had not really seen many people that were on like a respirator kind of thing at that point. I mean, now it's commonplace for me to, know some people, but at the time, I don't think I ever had. I didn't even think about that until now. So that was, of course, very striking to me. Here was this man on a respirator at the head of this organization, and even at CIL, although I didn't interact with him all that much, I saw him go about his day-to-day meeting with people. So yeah, that's the best I can describe my initial hit on Ed.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you say mild manner, because I've heard various stories about him, so I was like, oh, I didn't expect that. But like he was like a pretty strong advocate, but that was really cool just to hear like how like one-on-one interactions, like he pays attention to and like just hears like any concerns or what goals you have. I think that's really important to have, especially like as an advocate. You have to be able to listen to people, whether it's in a group setting or like one-on-one, so you guys can collectively work together for the end goal of making sure that people have like equal access and rights. So the next question is, what wisdom did Ed pass on to you?
I think who he was, who he was as a person was the wisdom, obviously commitment, and how, one of course, other leaders of the disability rights movement, but the commitment and how, anything worth doing, as I learned over the decades in life and starting there from him and other people, was that anything worth doing takes a lot of time, and it involves, even on your angriest days of, fighting for your rights, and this is not fair, and how we all talk to each other and commiserate and support each other, and to go on, that it does take a lot of commitment and footwork, I guess is the way to put it, in order to accomplish these goals at so many different levels and so many different arenas. So I got that from him early on.
Yeah, I think commitment is very key in order to, I agree with you that commitment, it has to be consistent. Like it's really important. That's how like how the movement is like still going on, because there's so many people who are like committed together to be able to help one another, and also like hear, at least hear people's concerns and whatnot. I think that's why it's been going on for so long as it is. Now, speaking of legacy, I'll just say, what was Ed's legacy overall?
He's known as the father of the independent living movement. And so the initial work that he did and the examples that he set, I think that's his legacy. I think people always look back and see him in that way.
I remember learning about him, and then when I volunteered for a local independent living center for Orange County, that would be the Dale McIntosh Center. That's how I got to know more about his legacy and what he's done, and how much, you know, independent living centers have transformed over the many decades since then. So it's really motivating to see like how one idea that he and many others had, like it's now transformed into like, hey, we have like we have a good amount of ILCs here in California. So really good ILCs. So the next.
And also, I was just going to say, then you sometimes you're saying things are making me think of other things, but it's like in the beginning, you know, at CIL, it's like overall more and more, there's a diversity of people with disabilities that are served by the independent living centers. And, you know, it started off, you know, maybe more specifically with physically disabled people, but then it expanded like everything else does, and the services that were offered and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, it has expanded quite a lot since then, which is great, because I think when I think of ILCs, they're really looking for not only just the whole community, but also like different sectors of the community, whether it's someone who's, you know, in the aging population, or someone who's really young who needs those resources to get out and, in a sense, experience the real world. Yeah. The next question is, share a story / anecdote about Ed that gives us an idea of who he was.
I was living in South County, and I had a very bad accident. I had fallen out of my van backwards off the left. And I was in a halo cast, and I was home. I went home after the acute care in a rehab hospital. In between the acute care and the rehab phase, instead of going to a convalescent hospital, I chose to go home pretty much independently and organize everything. In later years, that's not, I don't see that as so much as an option as then, but I was just like, if I get in, I'm not coming out. So during that period of time, and in the roles that he was in, and as busy as he was, and I was, you know, I didn't think of Ed as like a close friend. He took the time to drive down with someone that I knew as a friend. His name was Patrick, and they were close friends. And he and Patrick and his attendant, he came down to see me in my home and see how I was. And I remember them staying, and somebody ran to get Indian food for dinner, and it was very touching to me, and I always remembered it. And when he passed, a lot of stories when people were sitting around and, you know, talking about it, and services that came up, that he was like that. He had that very human quality of connection and caring about people. So that's my most personal tidbit of knowing him, the essence of who he was.
That's really sweet of him and Patrick checking up on you. Yeah. So the next question is, when was the moment you realized that he was a game changer?
I was working as a coordinator in like an outpatient clinic for people, disability services, and I'm trying to zoom in on at that time. So at that time, around that time, he became the head of the Department of Rehabilitation in California. And for some reason, you know, I tried to go intuitively every time I read this question, like, what comes up first? Like, what do I remember first? And so that's, to me, that's when I thought of him in that terms as a game changer. Because we, you know, at that period of time when we went through rehabilitation, like we went to the Department of Rehabilitation for services, and I remember I told the counselor that I wanted to be a reporter, a journalist, and I remember it clearly. He said, "What are you going to do?" He said, "They run to get coffee in the morning. Are you going to run to get coffee?" So so that was the response as a young person going to get advice and services from the service delivery system. So you understand that why, X amount of years later, not that many really, and I'm here in California, and here's Ed Roberts, who I described to you initially when I met him. Here he is now running the Department of Rehabilitation for the state of California. So that's, to me, when game changer, that's what came to me right away.
Wow, yeah, it's a good thing you mentioned DOR, because I remember learning about that fact. And I remember one of my friends, like he was just doing a little around on Facebook saying like, I can't believe, some people don't know about the fact that he used to be like the head of DOR at one point. I was like, well, yeah, he was. Yeah. And like they at least give him credit for that. And I'm glad my friend was like saying that, because I think people are like, oh, he did one thing. Is like, no, he did a multitude of things. Especially DOR. You're like, oh yeah, DOR is such a huge organization in itself. You're like, oh my goodness.
And what it meant for people, young people, and actually people he worked with, to see him in that role, right? Yeah. To see a man with that level of disability, a person with that level of disability in that role for his coworkers. I didn't, I'm thinking about that now. So.
Yeah, that's really cool. Just how much he grown over those years, and being able to be like, hey, you know what? I'm head of DOR. Here's what we're gonna do. And I think that was like such a huge moment. I mean, there's so many huge moments in his life for sure, but those were one of the huge moments. So on a lighter note, what is a funny story or memory that you have heard of it?
I have one. I didn't know if I would tell. Just in a snapshot, it was a national leadership training that ran across 50 states to train people primarily with developmental disabilities and their family members to be competent advocates at every level of government. And it was like 128 hours, and they had to go 8 weekends during the year and the whole thing. So we went out there, and I went out there with Ed and his attendant, and I forgot who else went out there. Probably myself too, with an attendant. And then one day he had to give a speech in the morning, and we were like already like 40 minutes late or something. And we were in the van going, and we passed McDonald's, and Ed wanted to stop for an Egg McMuffin. And so I'm telling you this story because we were laughing at the time, and me in the car and everybody else. And so I'm like always the person that's a half an hour ahead of everybody else sitting there waiting for everybody to come. So we got such a kick out of it, but then of course we talked him out of it. And then we landed, and of course went ahead and he gave the speech and everything. So, he was a person just like everybody else. And that was the anecdote that I remember that was really comical, because I was like, what, are you kidding me?
I think if I was in Ed's shoes, I probably would have stopped for an Egg McMuffin, but seeing how y'all were late for like 40 minutes late, I probably would be on your side, be like, hey guys, we gotta go. We're gonna miss this. They're not gonna give us enough time. But oh my God.
Well, I think he kind of got, maybe it wasn't 40 minutes late, but I think he kind of got that this was going to probably happen one way or another. I mean, we were coming like all the way from California, But I say that to you because he really was a human being, you know. On any given day, I have probably stories myself about that, not about going to give a speech someplace, but things that we all have them. And so did Ed. And that was a really great trip to travel there with him, to work on that project and be there in person. It was really a gift for me to do that.
Yeah, that was cool. Did he end up getting the egg McMuffin after he was done speaking, or he was like, nah, I'm going to eat something else?
I don't know. I can't remember on the way back. I don't think we came right back. I think we were probably there. So maybe there was like a lunch thing after it or something.
He's like, it's better. I mean, it's part of it. We'll just eat the food that's provided. We don't need to spend money. So why did he choose to become an advocate? But why did he end up choosing to become an advocate?
He was a student at Cowell Hospital. I think he was like one of the first students in a wheelchair there, and on UC campus. And he lived, at the time, there were no services for people, the students, disabled students that needed attending care. So they put them in the hospital wing, infirmary wing of the university. And out of that, with his, I guess, fellow students that were also disabled and needed support services, they got together and he had this idea that we're gonna create, I think maybe first came PDSP, physically disabled students program, to provide support services like the wheelchair repair and attending care and whatever kind of benefits advice was needed. It was in a little building with a big ramp on Telegraph Avenue someplace, or Durant. And so that's, I think probably from there on, that was the beginning of it. And then after that, it's like, okay, we're going to graduate. Now it's going to happen. So then it was like CIL. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think that's probably why he wanted to be in the community, and he had other people that he talked to that they supported each other, and then they began to, in an advocacy push, to create these support services.
Yeah, I think that perfectly answers not only the question on why he became an advocate, but also like his support system too. The last question, what would be Ed's dream for the disability community today?
That it's not just about laws, it's about attitudes to change, and that's gonna be, sometimes each individual person maybe change an attitude one person at a time, and we just kind of have to keep doing it. He'd want his work to continue and grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and it has, because we're here today, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, of course. And I think this is just amazing just to hear your experiences, and also getting to learn more about who Ed was as a person, because we only get to see like snippets of like interviews and documentaries and whatnot, but just hearing you, I thank you for taking the time out of your day to like share your experiences.
It's really nice to meet you, and you have a great sense of humor and a lot of energy, and I just go get them.
Thank you so much.